Yo, yo, yo. Welcome into another episode of Jake's Takes. I am your host, Jake Masucci, and today I am super excited for another edition of the show. Today, we're going over the Super Bowl. So, this is our third Super Bowl we've done. Again, last podcast we had Giovanni on, and I kind of wanted to talk about the Super Bowl, get my thoughts on it. It's our first Super Bowl champion that wasn't the Chiefs. Really an unbelievable performance by the Eagles. We're going to get all into it. It'll be a short podcast, short and sweet. We're going to talk about the game, what happened to the Chiefs, what can we expect moving forward, and all those crazy things. So, without further ado, I'm going to cue the music. All right. Welcome back into the show. And I am super excited for this episode. Again, it's a third Super Bowl that I'm covering here. So I'm really excited, and let's just get right into it here. So the Eagles win this game 40-22 in really dominating fashion. I mean, this was not a 40-22 game. The Eagles just flat out smoked them. And it was kind of crazy to watch. I went in this game thinking, okay, like this is going to be a really close game. And I think everybody was under that impression. Like the Chiefs coming into it -1.5. Some people thought the line would switch over. The line never changed. This was always Chiefs are favored. Like it's going to be hard for the Chiefs to lose this game. And the fact of the matter is I mean, like the Eagles came into this game and just flat out dominated. Like it was actually sensational. Looking at the game cast here on ESPN, the first thing, like you see the Eagles go right down the field and they have a 4th and 2, and they're immediately going like, okay, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to go for this. They go deep to AJ Brown. AJ Brown makes the play, and a flag comes out. And you're like, man, is it going to be this type of game? They call an offensive pass interference on AJ Brown with a little tiny push off, and you're like, man, like this, it's the refs, right? The Chiefs are always going to get these calls, and it led to a punt. But then, like when you saw that first Chiefs possession, especially for me, like I looked at it and I was like, the D line's getting to Mahomes like right away, and Mahomes seems like with happy feet. And to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever seen Patrick Mahomes with happy feet. That's what makes him so impressive. And he had those happy feet. He was trying to step up in the pocket, and it was really difficult. Was sacked multiple times in this game. They ended up punting away. And then the Eagles go right down, score a touchdown. Jalen Hurts with a little tush push, and it's 7-0. Like I picked the Chiefs, and I was kind of rooting for the Chiefs in this game. I was like, all right, they can make a comeback. They can make a comeback. Then the Eagles go down, field goal. Chiefs aren't moving the ball very much. It's 10-0. I'm like, all right, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. The Chiefs get a stop. They punt it away, and I'm like, okay, we're doing something here. And then Mahomes throws a really bad ball, intercepted by Cooper DeJean, touchdown, nothing. That was the first time I was like, okay, this might not be great here. And the Eagles got up 24-0 at halftime. And I'm like, man, like this is really, really not looking good. And right when it hit halftime and like the Chiefs couldn't go down and do anything before the end of the half, I was like, man, like this is not good, because the Eagles D line was just flat out controlling the line of scrimmage. It was insane. And Giovanni and I talked about it a lot with that Eagles D line. I've talked about it in the past with their substitution patterns and things of that nature. But the thing that was pretty clear to me before this game was that the Eagles D line is better than the Chiefs O line. It just is. And the Chiefs O line hasn't been too much of a problem because Tooney's been really good and they've been able to do things. But like when you're playing against that talented of a defensive line group, it's really difficult to maintain that success like moving forward. And that Chiefs O line just really, really struggled in this game. It was kind of embarrassing, man. Like Mahomes had no time to do anything. And I'm not saying that it was just the O line. I think Patrick Mahomes probably played his worst game that I've ever seen him play. Not gonna lie. Like it was pretty terrible. And the stats, like we're gonna look back and say, oh, 257, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like that's not a bad game. It was a bad game. It was pretty bad. Like he was not making great throws. It's the first time he'd go out of the pocket and the ball would be like he had one to D Hop where D Hop was wide open, and he makes a throw and it looks like D Hop drops it. But if you look at it, like it was pretty clear he should have just thrown it on his numbers. Instead, he tried to lead him, and D Hop like was sitting because it's zone coverage, and he was sitting in the open spot. So then he tried to go get it and couldn't hang on to it. You know, it was those types of plays. And then he had one where he threw it to Travis Kelce and it was on his legs. Like Mahomes was just, he was rattled. And that's because of that D line. You know, Jalen Carter, Josh Sweat was unbelievable in this game. And the Eagles D line just flat out dominated. The things that impressed me with the Eagles ended up winning this game 40-22. Like I said in the open, but again, they dominated this game. So, you know, like they were just awesome. The thing that impressed me the most about the Eagles was Jalen Hurts. And he had the exact type of performance that you need your quarterback to have. A guy that didn't turn the ball over. He was 17 of 22, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 interception. It was a bad throw. Other than that, he was really, really good throughout the game. You know, unbelievable. And then rushing, he was great. 72 yards rushing, a rushing touchdown. He was really great. He was what was able to make their run game going because guess what? Saquon Barkley did not have the great game. Everybody was like, oh, it's his 28th birthday. He's going to have an unbelievable game. Yeah, no, it didn't happen. He had 25 carries, 57 yards. And that's what impressed me about the Chiefs defense is I don't think they played bad. You know, there's 40 points on the board, but I really did not think the Chiefs defense played bad at all. Their defense was all over their run game. They took the Eagles' first option away and they were like, make Jalen Hurts beat you. And before that, if you're the Chiefs defense, that should be your philosophy because Jalen Hurts has been their question mark throughout the year. There's so many categories where he was really, really struggling in. And like, that's what you have to force them to. And they forced him to that. And guess what? Jalen Hurts beat them with his receivers. And his receivers were awesome. A.J. Brown, 3 receptions, 43 yards. Devontae Smith, 4 receptions, 69 yards. You know, like it was really impressive. And he was able to get the ball down to Saquon. Saquon had 6 receptions, 40 yards. They were trying to use Saquon through the pass game as well. It was just a really impressive performance from the Eagles offense to me. Like it showed you that Jalen Hurts hasn't lost it. You know, he's clearly still a top 10 quarterback in the NFL and was making plays at a high level. And to me, that was really impressive. And I was impressed with the Chiefs defense, you know, like they have so much on that defensive end. And this really goes to show you that the Chiefs offense was not what got them here. The Chiefs defense is what got them here. And they were just flat out incredible and they made the right plays, you know, so really impressed there. The main thing I kind of wanted to get to after the Super Bowl, because the game wasn't really that impressive, was talking about Mahomes' legacy. You know, we talked about it a lot with Giovanni, like if he were to win this game. And to be honest with you, I didn't really consider the fact that he could lose this game and he could lose this game in this way. You know, because as a Mahomes fan, like I'm rooting for him to be the GOAT. And the fact of the matter is this hurts. This hurts really bad. He's now 3-2 in Super Bowls, and this was the worst performance he's ever had in his career, in my opinion. It just was not, it did not look like he had it today. And I thought Brady did a good job in like staying like the fact that like when you're a quarterback in that situation and you lose a game like that, it's the only thing you can think of for so long. So this looks like the biggest blemish. It looks like the biggest thing that could hinder Mahomes from becoming the GOAT. But I also think it's the greatest thing for him because a lot of times, and like, you know, I've been reading so many books about like elite coaches, elite athletes, things of that nature. A lot of times it's like your biggest failure in whatever you're doing that leads you into that success. And to me, this is it for Mahomes. You know, he was one game away from a three-peat. And then he shows up against Philadelphia and everybody's expecting him to win. Everybody's expecting him to put on this clinic and to be unbelievable. And he wasn't there. You know, he wasn't there. And I think that's a big wake up call for him. I really do. Because yes, their O-line got outplayed. Yes, like they couldn't move the ball. Their run game was non-existent. But we knew that coming in. You know, and a lot of people, the main reason that people were still picking the Chiefs was the fact that Patrick Mahomes was on the other side, you know, and I wouldn't be as hard on Mahomes if they lost on a game winning drive by Jalen Hurts. I wouldn't be as hard as him. I'd be like, man, he played unbelievable. He did everything he could, blah, blah, blah. But it is clear that he did not do everything he could, you know, because he could have had that type of game to make that happen, you know. And to me, like, that's the main thing with Mahomes, where it's like, you know, like, are we sure here? Are we sure? So that's why I'm looking at this Mahomes legacy, and I got to wait a while before we bring that conversation up with Brady. I do. Like, he's got to make me forget about this. He's got to go back to throwing those 5,000 yard seasons and those MVP seasons and type like that. It worked being a game manager for 2 to 3 years and creating things and making stuff happen. It's still very impressive to me that they made the Super Bowl this year. But the fact that they got obliterated like they did was just not impressive. And it really hurts like how we look at him. I still think he's clearly the best quarterback in football, and we're holding him to a ridiculous standard, but we should. We should. That's how looking at Mahomes as one of the greatest of all time should be. And you should. Like, he's a top 3 quarterback, I think, of all time right now. But in order to get into that conversation with Brady, it just takes so much. And he had a chance to put himself right there with this game, and he really didn't show up. And I think like anybody should take that, and I think he's going to take it and have an unbelievable year next year. It's all about how you take that negativity. And Patrick Mahomes is one of the most competitive people I've ever seen. And like a lot of people, when I was listening to podcasts today talking about, I was actually listening to a college basketball show, and this guy was talking about looking at the Super Bowl, and he was like, my family, like the kids, like kind of see him as Michael Jordan, and he is kind of the Michael Jordan of our generation because he's won this much and he's done this much. And, it's crazy. And we didn't have Twitter and all that, so there wasn't as much hate on Jordan back in the day just because of this is a social media age. So you get the Chiefs are cheating, blah, 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 the ref crap, all that jazz. And I mean, I've said it off air, but talking about those penalties with the Chiefs, like I think the stat was after the Houston's Texans won, but their penalties in the last maybe last year, it was there's 48 penalties on the team that they were playing, right? And Russillo had his guess how many the Chiefs had in that same amount of time, and the Chiefs had 47 penalties. So it just goes to show you that like the penalty thing is a little off base, right? Like the Chiefs are still getting as many penalties as the other team. Juwan Taylor, their tackle, is the most penalized tackle in the NFL. There's stuff like that. So the refs aren't exactly like helping the Chiefs through this. It's the fact that they have one of the greatest coaches ever and one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. That's just the truth there. And that's why the Chiefs are back in the Super Bowl, and Josh Allen, who had a better team this year, isn't, or Lamar Jackson, who had a better team this year, isn't. And they'll get there. I think they're going to have a year where they break through, just like Joe Burrow did. When Joe Burrow might have a better team next year, maybe Joe Burrow breaks through again. So it's no knock on those guys. It's just goes to show you the level of greatness of Patrick Mahomes. And, it's the same thing with Brady. Like Peyton Manning couldn't get over the hump when Brady was doing all that stuff. It's the same thing. It's the same thing looking at it that way. But yeah, looking at Mahomes' legacy, like I do think you have to hinder it a little bit because of this performance and because of the fact that he didn't step up in the biggest stage at this point. But overall, like he's still top 3 quarterback of all time, and this is still one of the most impressive starts to a career ever. Like I was talking about it with my brother when we were watching the Super Bowl, and I was like, the crazy thing about Mahomes is like his worst year that we've seen, like team success wise and him wise, was he had 5,000 yards passing, 52 passing touchdowns, and like 10 interceptions, and they lost in overtime to Tom Brady and the Patriots. And that's crazy. That's a crazy standard to hold somebody to. But guess what? Like that's the standard we're holding Patrick Mahomes to, which to me is just flat out incredible. But let's look at the future of both these teams and like see where they're going to end up next year. I was talking about on the last show with Giovanni how confident I am in the Lions. So let's look at some free agents and see like, okay, can the Chiefs still be as good and make the Super Bowl next year? And let's see if the Eagles can be as good as well. So let's look at the Eagles' key free agents this offseason. This is an Adam Schefter tweet. So Zach Bond, that linebacker that got the interception, Josh Sweat, who had an unbelievable Super Bowl, was all over the place. The D tackle Milton Williams, Brandon Graham, who was awesome, Mekhi Becton, who's one of their elite O linemen, Fred Johnson on the O line as well, Avonte Maddox, Rick Levito, Kenneth Gainwell. And that's kind of the list of the people that matter. The other ones, like, it's depth, but, like, unless you're a football nut, like, you're not really going to care. So looking at it, it's a lot of O-line, a lot of D-line, and their skill guys they're maintaining pretty well. So they signed Saquon to a decent deal, and then they got Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts still coming back, and it's going to be about maintaining that O-line. The O-line is one of the best O-lines in the NFL, and they're really just building through their run game like awesomely. And Kellen Moore's probably going to take the Saints job, and we're going to have a coaching podcast talking about the new coaches soon. Looking at that, so they'll lose their offensive coordinator. They're probably bringing a guy that really likes the run game. I mean, Arthur Smith comes to mind just as a guy that comes to mind. He did a great job with the Steelers run game and building through the run, and they were winning again this year. But looking at the Eagles, like, I think they're going to try to maintain the O-line and then the D-line as well. I'm not sure if they'll be able to get everybody back. Josh Sweat's equity probably just went up after almost being the Super Bowl MVP, which is kind of crazy because I think for a moment there he deserved it because he was just all over the quarterback. He was sensational in that game, and Mason Graham was awesome, and Mekhi Becton's great on the O-line. So those are three guys that the Eagles have to bring back. It's going to be about bringing back this core, and they're going to be good no matter what. I think they're playoff good no matter what, especially now that they figured out, okay, how do we play the D-line? How do we play the O-line? That's part of the reason why all of us were a little skeptical of how good they would be this year, because they didn't figure that out last year, and it was just a crazy meltdown. That's why I talked about a lot last year on the podcast and how crazy it was that they lost to Tampa and that all that happened because they were this talented. They were this Super Bowl talented. That's why it's so impressive there. So looking at this for the Eagles, it's going to be trying to bring back the core. They were the best team in football this year. I think it's an argument with them and the Ravens, and it's an argument with them and the Bills. But overall, I think they match up great, especially with Jalen Hurts playing that way. So I probably would have picked them against either of those teams as well. So looking at it that way, you just got to maintain your team. And I think they'll be at the top of the NFC. I talked about it. I think the Lions will lose some wins, but overall still be okay and be able to win some games and be a real contender there. So to me, the top two teams in the NFC going into next year are Detroit and Philadelphia. Okay, let's move into the Chiefs. All right, so the Schefter tweet for our key free agents for the Chiefs is their guard Trey Smith, linebacker Nick Bolton, safety Justin Reed, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Charles Emmett, who he's really good. I cannot pronounce his last name right, but he's a really, really good D lineman for them. Tristan Warden, who was also really, really good. Him and Chris Jones are just ridiculous on the D line. And then Kareem Hunt, Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson, McCole Hardman, offensive tackle DJ Humphreys, Samaje Perine's in there. Carson Wentz, their backup quarterback, is also in there. Okay. So looking at that, a lot of O-line and a lot of defense. Justin Reed definitely needs to be a priority here. He's sensational. Nick Bolton definitely needs to be a priority. To me, like, the Chiefs have been able to figure it out at receiver. So a lot of these receivers I'm not really too concerned about. They also did lose, I believe it's Raji Rice. Who's the main receiver that they lost? Edit this. Yeah, Raji Rice. I was right. Okay. The Chiefs also did lose Raji Rice, which he'll be a big piece to bring back for the Chiefs. So looking at it that way, I think it's going to be maintaining that defense, trying to maintain your O-line. I think Trey Smith would be a good get to come back. But also, like, I think you got to realize, okay, our O-line is good, but it's not good enough to go against the best D-line of football or the better ones in football. So we got to really build our O-line again. And yes, you still have Patrick Mahomes. And yes, I was talking about legacy-wise, it'd probably be better for him to be throwing for 5,000 yards. But to be honest with you, they've made 3 straight Super Bowls. So they should be continuing how they're building their team. And they're building their team through their O-line, their D-line, and their defense. And that's how they should maintain building those teams. This is what I've been saying like all along. This is why I was so high on the Chargers offseason, because they brought in Jim Harbaugh, who was going to build through their O-line. This is why I was so high on the Bills offseason, because they brought in new guys and they built through their O-line and they got rid of their receivers. This stuff works. This is where the NFL is turning. You're building through your O-line, you're building through your run schemes, and it's making teams better. Baltimore got better this year because they brought in Derrick Henry and they built through their O-line. This is just the common thing, and it needs to happen. So if I'm the Chiefs here, you realize, oh, shoot, we have a good O-line, but we don't have a great O-line. Why did we win 2 Super Bowls in a row? Because our O-line was great, and we had Patrick Mahomes, right? This O-line was good. And I mean, to be honest, it might have been okay, right? Like Joe Thuney was playing tackle, and he's normally a guard. And I listened to Jeff Saturday talk on Ryan Russillo's podcast about how when you're playing guard, I think this is actually Bill Simmons' podcast, but when you're playing guard and you move to tackle, most of the time you're playing guard for a reason, and it's because you have shorter arms. That's the main reason why people are playing guard. So moving to tackle, you don't understand like how different it is, right? It just changes. And when you're going against a more athletic D line and more athletic guys on the edge, it really kills you. And that's why Josh Sweat had an unbelievable game, because he's so athletic and was just all over the place. So Thuney's a fantastic O-lineman. And I mean, even Brady talked about it, how like awesome he was and vital he was for the Patriots runs. But the fact of the matter is like, you can't ask him to move to tackle. You can't ask him to do all of this to make your O-line stable. And it was clear from the jump that the Chiefs didn't really think that they could block the Eagles. And they came in, and the Chiefs were the ones that were timid, and the Chiefs were the ones that backed down. And that's why the Eagles won the game, So looking at it that way, for me, like the Chiefs got to build that O-line a little more than what they have, and then bring back the defense. Because I think the defense was really, really good. Their corners really, they did their best. McDuffie was on A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown's one of the best receivers. So one-on-one coverage, like, to be honest with you, if I'm Spags, I'm chilling with that. I'm absolutely chilling with that. Make A.J. Brown beat me all day. He'll probably beat me more than 50% of the time, but we're going to bring help, right? We're going to bring these exotic blitzes at Jalen Hurts. We're going to do all this stuff. And if Mahomes doesn't turn over the ball as much, maybe you give up only 28 points, and then the Chiefs, they could figure it out and give you more help. They might win that game, because they did figure out how to score later. And yes, that happens, blah, blah, blah. Like if the fourth quarter happens, the other defense isn't going to play as hard when they're already up 40 points. So yeah, maybe it doesn't matter. But to be honest with you, if Mahomes has more time, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the world. He's going to give you more than 22 points. So it would have been a close game. And the fact of the matter is nobody's going to pick against Patrick Mahomes in a close game. It's just the truth. So if I'm looking at the Chiefs, you got to build that O-line. You got to do all that. So if I had to pick where the Chiefs are headed next year and where they're going to finish, I think it's going to be a little rough. I think their O-lines, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to build through their O-line. And I think Mahomes is going to have a ridiculous season again. But I can see him being a 2 or 3 seed, and I think Buffalo's on the right track of how they're building, and I think Baltimore is on the right track of how they're building, and one of those teams are going to finally knock them out. It's too much to ask for the Chiefs to be this, it's too much to ask for the Chiefs to be this consistent. I think it's way too much to ask. And even though I love the Chiefs and I've loved this run, I think they will not make the Super Bowl next year. That's my take. All right. That is going to wrap up the show for today. Shorter podcast today, Super Bowl talk, and just kind of wanted to get my Super Bowl takes out there. We'll be back at you guys soon, just one this week, but we'll be back. We'll be back next week, and we're going to try to maintain that weekly schedule. I'll try to give you 2 when I got more time, but we're heading to IU tomorrow, and we got Detroit on Sunday. So the season's winding down, and we'll have that March Madness podcast for you soon. Got to get Asher Smith in here for a little college basketball catch up soon to before we get into all of that. But the sports season already winded down. It's kind of crazy. Football's over. Go watch basketball. That's what I tell everybody. It's time to catch up on college basketball. It's time to catch up on the NBA. The NBA is crazy now with the Luka Doncic trade. So don't tell me the NBA is falling apart, because I think we're back now that the Luka trade happened. So super excited with it. The Pistons are good. Basketball's here. It's my favorite time of the year. So, all right, guys, I'll be back at you guys soon. Peace.